Welcome back with my kind of critique of the whole hype around Oasis at the moment. If you watch my channel, you will see lots of videos dedicated to Oasis. So I used to be at least a fan, and in a sense, you never stop being a fan. They were the most important band in the 90s to me, except the Beatles, but they weren't active in the 90s. I often said it on this channel. Was really important band to me, but I also often said on this channel that in the last 20 years, since the 90s ended basically, I haven't really listened much to them, and all their post-90s albums didn't do much for me, and I think they deteriorated from project to project until they split up. Also not a big fan of their solo careers, especially Liam's solo career, which is just based around this nostalgia factor. It's almost like Ringo Starr's solo career, where every second song kind of is a quote of a Beatles song. Liam did it quite the same. I kind of liked Noel's solo ventures when they were a bit more experimental, when he was more dancey, but those were also the albums by him that flopped. And with his last album, Council Skies, he decided to go back to a more familiar Oasis kind of sound, and I was pretty bored by that album, I have to admit. And now the reunion, I'll admit it, I also was a bit carried away by that hype and that instant nostalgia shot in the arm you got from all that media coverage. So I was one of those millions of fools who tried to get tickets on Saturday. And I almost got one. I was when I was in the queue at 10 a.m. when it started. I was like number 6,000, so great number. And I wanted to have a ticket for the first show in Cardiff. But the longer I waited, the more I asked myself, do I really want to? Do I really want to go to? It's really expensive for me, and also my girlfriend. We would be a party of two, to travel to England, or in this case Wales, for just that show, because we have already booked another England holiday next year. We almost always go to England for a holiday once a year, but this would have been a second time there. And I asked myself, am I still that much of a fan? Is my heart and my passion still in it that much? And when it was our turn to buy the tickets with all this dynamic pricing stuff, Ticketmaster accelerating the prices of tickets, the tickets were also that much more expensive as expected, and then I decided no, we're not going to do it, and I really felt a kind of relief and happy. I felt happy of this for this decision. The more and the longer and longer in previous days the whole hype around Oasis prolonged, I was more and more disgusted with the whole corporatism, commercialism, the soulless vibe of the whole ordeal. Those shows, I think, they feel like shows like Adele or Coldplay or Taylor Swift would do these days. Corporate bullshit that I always detested, and one of the reasons why modern music, pop music, sucks, to me at least. I'm sure to many other people also. I think people like me who grew up with a band like Oasis in the 90s, we are the ones who really can't stand that hype business, that events fan, that glory hunter, frontrunner kind of fandom where you travel around the world for thousands of euros to watch someone who's past his prime. It's really, I think the whole thing, as it seems to me, we haven't yet heard anything from the Gallagher brothers themselves really about this whole thing, but it seems very cynical, the way it was hyped up by the media, and the way that people and institutions, organizations who didn't really care for the bands or a band like Oasis until they're that big juggernaut bands who sells millions of tickets, those people never really cared about bands like that. If Oasis would have never been a number one band but with the same music, those people wouldn't really give a care about it. And it attracts people who just want to be able to say, I've been there to this historical show, but it's as a musical experience. I think it can't be as good as anything they did in the 90s. First of all, Liam's voice has deteriorated so much since the 90s. It got a little bit better in the past couple of years, okay, but it can never go back to the glory of his voice in the Morning Glory and Definitely Maybe era. And it's also like I said, we haven't heard interviews with him or Liam yet, but it seems like he's only in it for the money. It's okay if you're doing it also for the money, of course it is. Pop music, pop business is always hyper capitalism. I'm aware of that. I'm working in that business. But it shouldn't be just about that, at least when you're an act like Oasis. When you're an act like Taylor Swift, okay, then it's just a product, and it's just your fans are users. They're not really, it's not the same with this hyper commercial kind of pop music. But Oasis should be different, and all that stuff about them being a working class band. With this. The way this was orchestrated, I don't think there's much left much of that sentiment, and I admit it. I was I was also taken by that wave of nostalgia and imagining how things could have been or how things will be when they reunite. And I also made my fantasy set list in my previous video. And I still stand by that. It would be a good set list, but will the concert be good? Will the performance be good? I doubt that, but the set list is good, I think. If I'm wrong and they're not just in it for their money and record a new album and it's a real comeback and not just quickly grabbing £100 million each, that's the sum I've heard. If it's also about an artistic comeback, I'll give a new Oasis album, of course, I'll give it a listen without much expectation, but I'll give it a fair listen, of course, and I'm curious about it. But at the moment, the whole thing leaves a kind of a bad taste in my mouth, but a good taste in my mouth has been left by Nick Cave's new album, Wild God. It came out on Friday, and this is like, I'm showing this now because these are the two sides of my pop fandom these days, these past 3 or 4 days, because this was such a gave me such great emotions listening to that. And it's a big artist, Nick Cave, of course, but it's not remotely the same kind of attention that the Oasis comeback got, and it's basically around the same time, exactly the same time. And this is really what pop music or rock music even is about or should be about in a perfect world. Again, also Nick Cave wants to make money off this, of course. And I also purchased that limited edition with the clear see-through vinyl, and of course these things, this habit of releasing several editions of an album, that's a cash grab as well, of course. But it's a minor cash grab, and it looks good. It's a nice thing. But the content of this album, Wild God, that's what Oasis should be about. What this album does to you, what they also in their solo careers haven't been about for the past 20 years. It's an album that has meaning, it has soul, it has heart, it's emotional, but it's not heavy. It has an elegance and lightness that makes you feel good. Not all those songs are happy songs, but they all feel you good. It's almost like a religious experience, as often with Nick Cave, listening to that. And after all the tragedies that happened in his life the last couple of years, this is his comeback to a more joyous, joyful, optimistic kind of outlook as an artist. And that's what art should be about. His biography and where he's at in his life at that moment, that gets reflected perfectly by that album, and so you can emote with it. But Oasis just playing their old songs for €300 and you're in the middle of a stadium 1 kilometer distant from them with stadium sound, which is often very bad sound. I decided I'm not going to shell out £500 each, you know, for 2 persons, so more than £1,000 just for 2 tickets standing in a field. I'm quoting Pulp now, sorted for ease and with, plus the travel costs. I'm glad I had that this weekend to listen to Nick Cave. That made me feel good, but the whole stress with Oasis didn't make me feel good. So far, Wild God by Nick Cave is my favorite album so far of that year. Is it as good as his best albums? I'm not sure yet. I hadn't the time yet with the album. I listened to it twice now. I can't even tell you what song is, you know, the title. If I'm listening, if I'm reading the tracklist, I don't really know which song is which song, but it sounds good. He made so many great albums that I'm not sure if I would say it's a top 5. I think he must have made more than 20 albums in his career, studio albums. It's probably not a top 5. It's probably not going to be a top 5 album by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds for me, but maybe a top 10 album, you know, and that would be a brilliant album, and that would make it better than any album that Oasis as a band or as the Gallagher's as solo artists had made since the 90s. You know, I still love the first 2 Oasis albums, and I, for perverse reasons, kind of enjoy the third album, Be Here Now, as well. But after that, you know, it's not as good anymore. I've seen Oasis 3 times, and it got worse and worse with each concert. And I seen Nick Cave once. It was brilliant. That's also 20 years ago now. Must have been about 20 years ago now. And one good thing about the Oasis thing is, I've heard, we all heard the rumors. It's not yet officially confirmed, but there's talk about Bonehead is back in the group. I think that's important for 2 reasons. Because Bonehead, he's one. I'm happy for him for the, you know, the money aspect of it. You know, I don't think he will get remotely as much money from it as the Gallagher brothers. But, you know, all the photos and so on suggest it's not really the Gallagher brothers plus a backing band. It's not really Oasis anymore, which is a shame. I'm really a fan of the 90s lineups, especially the very first with Tony McCarroll. But okay, I think Gixie doesn't want to do it anymore. But Bonehead, I'm really happy for him. He seems like a decent fella. He had a bad time, you know, he had cancer in past years, and I think, you know, I'm really happy for him, for the money, and also that he's now on this big stage again. I know he played with Liam Gallagher as well, but, you know, Oasis, that's a real big stage now. So I'm happy for Bonehead, and I'm happy for the fans at the shows that Bonehead is in it, because it feels better and it also sounds better with Bonehead, you know. He may not be as good a musician as Andy Bell or Gam Archer, but he's the right musician for Oasis, as was Tony McCarroll and Gixie. Not the best musicians in the world, but they were the perfect, you know, lineup for Oasis, for that kind of music. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.